Welcome to the show.
Yes.
Today, we will be talking to you, Anant and I. Anant, who's the CTO of ArmorCode and the head of marketing at ArmorCode. Russell has a product security manager at Snapdocs. I'm quite impressed with the background that you bring. I still remember the first conversation I had with you, and you're talking about your experience at Cisco and then
Right.
AWS building this security programs.
Sure.
Both companies are M&A juggernauts, and
Sure.
the kind of breadth that brought your experience, I was quite impressed. And that's the day I figured we should do a podcast and tell you a story here. So Thank you very much and welcome to the show.
Sure. Yes, thank you very much. Well, first off, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to appear on your podcast. Appreciate that. Yes, my name is Russell Ragar. I am currently with Snapdocs as the product security manager. I have a kind of a long career. So in any case, go ahead. You can ask any question you like. I'm open.
Yeah, all right.
Sure.
Yeah, so Russell, usually when I start this podcast, I start with something personal so that we get to know you and the audience get to know you as a person, right?
Right.
And one of the questions that I asked is, in your experience so far,
Sure.
is there an experience that you can think of, either from when you were a kid or you're a college, whatever it is, that has shaped you most to be the person that you are today?
Sure. Okay, certainly. I believe, yes, actually, I think that one of the first experiences that I had coming into the world of technology, and actually being a technologist, I think really was set the theme actually for a lot of my life. So I think I go back to that. Really, I came into the world of technology when with distributed computing, when PCs were actually in environments with mainframes. So we were basically the rebels, the rebel distributed computing people who said that we could run businesses with minis and also distributed PCs and things like that, rather than actually the mainframe world. And one of the first things I saw then was that a lot of the people who were really experienced technologists at that point in time, who were actually had all this experience from the mainframe world, they did not, they wouldn't accept the change. Okay, they wouldn't work on the PCs, basically. They wouldn't do that. So ultimately, they ended up leaving the field, okay, because they couldn't make that particular jump. There was actually like a technological inflection point where we're actually changing dramatically from one system to another. And I think that taught me a lesson really quickly. And well, actually, I want to just bring up a point that those people who were actually the mainframe, the engineers who actually had those expertise, they had a lot of great skills which applied to the new world, but they didn't give it to us. Okay, so they left instead. So they had change management systems, they had configuration management, they had better on-calls, they had a lot of stuff that was really great. And it took us a long time in the distributed PC world to basically, with networking and things like that, okay, to build up that expertise again. So it was really unfortunate. I think it was a big loss that there were so many people who would not make this change. And throughout my career, I've seen this again and again. Okay, so one of the things that I've learned, because I believe that as technologists, we are really close to technology, and technology is constantly changing and advancing. And really, it's the source of disruption in our society. So being a technologist means you're really close to the thing that actually is causing the most disruption and change. And I think that really, to be successful as a technologist, you have to be willing to accept that you're constantly going to have to learn things, get good at something, and then throw it away. Move on to the next thing. There's this constant change, right? And that's something that that you should acknowledge from the beginning. And I think I was lucky and fortunate to get this as like my first experience, basically, like taught that, like, okay, that don't invest yourself in a particular technology or really in a particular process, because realistically, I saw the same thing happen like when we moved to from in project management from waterfall to agile processes, or the same thing is occurring now with like moving to CI/CD stuff or like DevSecOps or things like that. That basically there are major paradigm shifts, and you have to be willing to accept the change. And then you have to relearn and be constantly curious to be successful as a technologist. I think that is definitely the lesson that I learned that's reoccurred again and again. And I've seen many people who do not make that change. You're right.
Yeah, very poignant point. As you said, as human beings, we have experience, but the technology that we use keeps changing. But just because the technology changed, the things that we learned are not absolute.
You have to learn how to keep changing and keep growing. You do, and you have to be willing to give up on something you're really good at, which is not always easy. Yes,
like you said, but also don't change too many variables at the same time. And as you are throwing away things, what is the lessons that you learn and the knowledge that you learn that you take forward, and it doesn't go out with people, and it kind of stays in the organization so that organization can build on top of it. So great. Russell, as your journey, from the start of your career to becoming what you are today, would you like to kind of go back in the memories and share with us?
Okay, that's fine. From a career perspective, I began as a technologist, basically a cowboy network manager, basically, in universities and things like that, and moving into hospitals. So I was doing work in both academia and hospitals, which was interesting cultural differences. But yeah, I started as a system administrator, network engineer, system integrator. So basically started, and that was really my path at that point, and building out networking, LANs, changing businesses over to using computers, moving systems over from paper. To be honest, I was replacing paper in many cases. So in any case, that's how I started. And then that got me, as I led bigger projects, I got into IT project management, leading those kinds of things. And that led me naturally to IT management over time. And I became involved in IT service management. I got really, I like very much building, being a people manager and growing technologist. I found I really like that. I like the edge of like being between the business and being between the technology, and having a team of people who work directly for me, trying to drive this. So I kind of like to be a functional manager. I like that particular position. A functional manager of technologists, kind of like give us a business goal, and then I'll kind of drive them toward that. That seems to be my sweet spot. I've been through a lot of different companies. I came here to Silicon Valley in basically late 1999. And I have been through a variety of different tech companies, worked in semiconductors, worked in a lot of different technologies, networking, things like that. I've been acquired 6 times. I started thinking about basically it was a people process systems thing. And I realized that you had to actually give people a career path in order to get them successful, like to get them to buy into the changes you wanted. You actually needed, when we acquired people, we had to help get them to their next job, basically, for have them understand that there was opportunities if they let go of their old thing. So I did a lot of work in that space, and I think I improved the mergers and acquisitions program for Cisco, because I was working specifically in like labs, data centers, SDLC processes, those kinds of things, basically all the change management systems and things like that. All the engineering IT stuff basically is what I was doing. So I was running, I built a program called the Business Unit Readiness Workstream, working with engineering operations experts basically to do that kind of thing. And then we kind of built that up and expanded it. And I led about, I guess there was a total of about 40 different acquisitions, and working through the integrations and cleaning up a lot of acquisitions that Cisco had acquired but did not complete the integration for. That's basically how that started. And then that got me involved in doing security, because realistically, from an integration perspective, the reason for doing integrations, or actually to finishing, or in other words, to standardizing things, is generally to it's reduce costs, it's to decrease inhibitions, technical things that prevent collaboration. So you can't get, so the 2 teams can't work together. You got to get rid of that kind of stuff. And then really the third thing that's largest is a lot of risk in acquisitions. So the process of actually figuring out the acquisition integration plan and how to implement that is a great way of actually controlling risk for your company.
Awesome. That's a great journey, Russell. And moving to Silicon Valley in 99 is, I would call, perfect, right time at the right place.
During the .com boom. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Then it
That's where I think the software
Yeah.
industry kind of skyrocketed. The hockey
Right,
stick in application and software and
Sure.
product came up.
Right.
So really, really impressive experience. Would you like to touch a bit upon your experience at AWS?
Okay, sure. I joined AWS about, was that 6 years ago? 6 years ago, AWS was interested in creating an acquisition integration program, particularly in the space of security. So AWS security was interested in doing acquisition integrations. So I built the program to do that and define, I performed basically the acquisition integration due diligence myself, went out and looked at companies to how they were operating, the people involved, all the systems from both the corporate, all their corporate systems as well as their products. So looking at the products and how they do software development and do those kinds of evaluations, and then figure out how to harden them before we actually do the acquisition, or if there had to be security changes that would actually have to be put into place before we agreed to the acquisition, working out those terms of those things. And then once the acquisition deal was complete, basically working with the acquired companies. In most cases, what we were doing was we were acquiring like smaller teams, basically about, between 2 and maybe 200 or maybe 75, mostly 2 to 75, that we would make we would basically bring a group in and we would create a new business line for AWS, which is a great way to do it. I mean, seeding a new product by acquiring the product, but then we had to basically move it on to our SDLC processes and actually change out their corporate stuff, things like that. So and it was highly successful because AWS culturally is it's in a go-go phase of expansion still. People think it's a mature company, but it's actually in the go-go phase of expansion. So there's not that much change between a startup that they were buying and the go-go phase of expansion thing, right? So that basically means that the people were happier making those changes. So it worked well.
It is quite impressive to see the kind of processes that you just explained. The fact that they did the due diligence even before agreeing to acquire a company, that shows they wanted to make security is well thought out. I hear stories about companies acquiring other companies and then trying to deal with all the security implications that come with integrating that company, right? So to do this, that's quite impressive.
Well, yeah, you definitely need to do due diligence before doing an acquisition, so you know what you're getting involved in. I mean, there were cases in which where AWS acquired a new product and we discovered that the product was missing authentication. Okay, so it's like a serious problem actually. It was just trusting that would work in a trusted network all the time. Okay, so there was like a cluster basically, and the nodes basically all trusted each other, that kind of stuff. And that's an example that we needed to resolve that problem before we'd be willing to take ownership of the product, right? So things like that. So yeah, you do have to think about that kind of thing. It's surprising, and there's no substitute for actually going on site and meeting people and talking to them and seeing what things look like. I was all in an acquisition where I basically turned in safety concerns because the environment that they were working in was a fire trap. Okay, and I'm like, that's nothing I ever expected to do as a security professional, because I'm a technical security professional. But I'm like, okay, you send me in here to do the evaluation. We need to do something about the fire code, about this location. So that was an unexpected problem. And sending a bunch of forms, yeah, that's a good point. We used to send a bunch of people. We still do this at Cisco. We did it. We send forms like describe your environment. Okay, and I knew the forms were failing because as we were driving up on one of our acquisitions once, there was a giant satellite dish that was like 300 feet across on the roof that was never covered on any of the forms that we asked. Okay, so in other words, we never asked about this giant satellite dish that was dominating the building. But when you go there, it's like immediately obvious as you're driving up. It's like, that's not on any of the forms. Okay, so you can't, basically, you still have to go there. So you do have to see the surprising things, right?
Right.
Sure.
So Russell, impressive experience and the background that you have. From 2 people acquiring 2 people company to 200 people company, right? You have spent all. So keeping that in mind, since you're seeing from very tiny startups making it bigger and more structured startups and AWS at a scale and that you are working. How would you define the hallmarks of a successful and a great, AppSecOps?
AppSec program. Okay. Okay. That's a great question. Okay. So I think that, well, the role of AppSec is changing. I think that it largely used to be traditionally a kind of a consultative model where engineers would come to AppSec and actually get opinions or to get additional requirements or things like that. And a lot of the security threat modeling and things like that was actually being done by AppSec. I think that now with the shift to DevSecOps, things are changing where we actually realize that to be successful, we have to integrate security into the development processes, right? We can't really be separate. It can't just be, AppSec can't just be a gate. So I think that a great AppSec program or great AppSecOps program to me today is one in which you're tightly integrated into what the engineering deliverables that are actually going through the pipeline are, and you're making sure the right security deliverables are being done during the SDLC. You understand, you own the SDLC processes and standards for that, and you provide transparency to the business so they can actually understand what we're really doing from a security perspective to make things secure. Transparency about the security issues, but also transparency about security deliverables. I think that trying to make sure, I think at this point, I like AppSecOps where AppSec owns a lot of the tooling to kind of like to gather the information about the different kind of security testing, so we can shift left and try to get the findings or basically the test results back to the developers as quickly as possible. So I think that to me, a strong AppSecOps program at this point is you've got solutions, which hopefully you kind of own some of these services in some ways. But I also think that even if you're using the testing, the engineering owns some of those services. You provide that transparency and you make sure the workflows are working correctly, right? I think that is key to AppSecOps. Sure. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
Sorry, I was on mute. So
no problem.
What I hear very strongly is one, doing very, very strong collaboration with the tech team.
Oh, yes.
And since security is, has been traditionally been seen as a gate, application security is different. You have to start early.
Yes, that's true.
Also, a lot of people call it shift left in the cycle. It saves cycles, fixes, testing. So a lot of time, elapsed time gets saved when you shift left. So how is your what are your thoughts on shifting left, and what has it meant for you? Talk about shift left. Are you able to achieve it, or is the goal still distant?
Oh, okay.
To reach that ideal state.
Okay, that's a great question. Yes, we are able to shift left in a variety of different ways. Okay, I came to Snapdocs here about a year ago, and we are still growing I founded our AppSec program basically, and went through the hiring and grew out and built our platforms and things like that. So we're still progressing and growing, but yes, we are shifting left. I agree with you that a key in AppSec is to be very closely integrated with the engineering community and the software developers, and also the product managers, so that there's basically a collaboration in those spaces. And I think that to shift left to me means, well, first off, you got to start all the way to the right. I think that it's true. I mean, vulnerability management, understanding what your current tech debt is basically is where you have to start. So you can understand what, basically what's where you are, because everybody has some security tech debt. Okay, there's vulnerability management, and then it should happen. You need to start there. What I'm kind of saying is that then once you've actually developed the tools that you can determine vulnerabilities at that point, you can use those same testing tools, security testing scanners, vulnerability scanners, and then move them earlier up in the process. I think it's a good idea to actually have consistent testing tools and parameters across all the phases of your SDLC, because that way you're not suddenly like, once it gets out to prod, we've got a different test that comes up with a different result. So what I'm trying to say is that establish the security testing tools that work well in prod, and then move them to earlier parts like release testing, obviously being next, but then you're after whatever, you need to work closely. It depends on which groups. Some people are doing CI/CD, some groups have, release trains. You have to adapt to the engineering teams that you're working with and whatever their processes are. But you can work with them to, well, really from a release testing point of view, the next thing you do is actually try to work out either soft or hard gates and do the appropriate thing as far as do the right testing and release testing before you release. And this can be done through a variety of different means, through integrations with Jenkins or through GitHub actions or things like that. There's a lot of ways. But you start at that point where kind of like figure out how you want to do your soft or hard gates, and then move to development. So you're moving so that developers actually get daily tests or immediate tests that they can actually fire off for things like that as well. That is what is. Sure.
Yeah, that's a very interesting that how you explained your journey there. So this requires changes among the engineering, the software development team
sure.
Also, right?
Right.
So are there any challenges that you faced and how you overcame those challenges?
I think that there's
best practices
because of resource kind of conflicts or other other priorities, right? So I mean, you always have the problem that you have to make a case for getting the resources to work on security deliverables. Okay, now the way I've approached it recently with Snapdocs, because basically standing up an AppSec program here, or product security program, for the first time, is that I've decided that the right thing to do is to try to get the tools in the developers' hands. In other words, work on the net new. Okay, work with product management, so that so we understood what was coming into being, what were the product initiatives, what are the things were actually being developed, and we get the tools into the hands of, first off, security champions. I think that's an incredibly useful tool and program that everyone should have. A security champion, to my mind, is a software engineer within the engineering teams, who's embedded in the engineering teams, who's a liaison, an affiliate to the security program, and they should be security enthusiasts, but they're also like there are boots on the ground, right? So we use the security champions program to support that. A distributed method of actually doing threat modeling, for example, or design reviews. So in any case, what I'm trying to get at is that in order to be successful, you need to go to leadership and say, like, to make a security champions program, you want to look at it this way and say, okay, the easy thing to do is just have everyone who wants to be a security champion volunteer, but that doesn't really work. If you need a security champion in each pod or each engineering group in order to actually to have distribute out authority to some extent, but also like action items or things like that, what you have to do is you have to define what the security champion role should be, and then how much of their time they actually need to do these things. And then you have to make that clear to leadership and engineering leadership as well, that this is your ask. That's the beginning thing. You can't just basically say, we're just gonna have a community and it's gonna be all free form, because you won't get the right people in the right places. You need to basically, to get a certain amount, a commitment of people, right? Then you I've taken the approach that the engineering managers should be the ones who name who the security champions are. So they're designated by the security champions themselves, but I'm asking for those resources. Okay, so that's important. This allows me to do things like, for net new, things which are basically development that's currently underway. I can actually do the testing and see if there's any current new security problems that result from these things and fix them then, right? This is relatively easy because those are currently staffed projects. I don't have to ask for additional people to work on stuff. And with your tech debt stuff, I have to go to engineering leadership and actual company leadership and say, okay, these are groups of work that need to be staffed, right? So I have to staff that. So the resourcing is very different for tech debt versus net new. So I suggest that it's very important that you make clear asks and get time commitment to be successful in clearing both the net new issues or getting, improving your secure software development lifecycle processes, as well as getting the resources for dealing with your tech debt things. The same thing is true if you do SLAs for vulnerabilities. You're going to need buy-off and all your leadership to actually get those done, and that's really going to lead to a resource management where you're going to need to associate a certain amount of software developers to resolving problems and a commitment to those things. So I think formal commitments for resourcing is an important part of AppSec in order to be successful. Does that answer that?
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, cool.
So for coming back to making the program successful, while it's important to have an experience like yours to know what not to do versus what to do.
Okay.
What you also realize is that doing everything over Excel sheets or with existing tools becomes infinitely impossible to do vulnerability management and live in this agile world where there are so many microservices, releases, polyglot, all those things going on. How to manage those efficiently. And one important thing with developers is that how do you timely inform them about the issues to be fixed so that they can be fixed either in the same cycle or follow-up release. So what do you think is the most important thing to have in such a tool and a platform? And talking specifically about ArmorCode, how it has helped in shaping up your AppSec program.
Okay, cool. I think that I probably should talk about how we chose, why we chose ArmorCode and kind of our evaluation there. Okay, obviously, as I just stated, I was forming a new AppSec program last year in 2021. And we realized that we needed to be able to consolidate all the data from all these different scanners. I mean, obviously we had islands of data everywhere. And different tools, which were hard to get to work with our engineers with. And then, yes, we would end up having to dump things out to worksheets and doing stuff with Jira and things like that. There was a lot of manual processes. And we knew it wouldn't scale. So we decided the first thing is, like, we sat down and tried to figure out an architecture of what it is that we needed to, what were these workflows? What were the use cases? And then we looked for products. The first thing we did was actually look for open source. We did consider building it all ourselves. And we looked at Defect Dojo and we evaluated the part of what the open source products were available and saw that it didn't really have a complete solution. It would take a lot of work for us to actually implement it. So we kind of did some, like, basically napkin level calculations on how much work it would actually take us to build our own application posture security management system. Then we decided that we should go out and look, for vendors who actually had built something like this. So, and we evaluated ArmorCode, Tromzo, and 𝗤𝗍security against Defect Dojo. Right. What we did was we did it basically as a modified Delphi method. So I and my three security engineers, because this is the biggest, most important decision we're likely to make in a couple of years, I think. Picking out our application, our AppSec platform. So I decided I wanted buy-in from all the security engineers, and I wanted their input. So individually, I involved all of my security engineers in doing the evaluations for these products. We did get a proof of concept for all of them. We built proof of concept labs and tried to basically validate that they actually had the features that we wanted. And I think that ultimately we just unanimously, all four of us basically, because I was one of the people who was reviewing as well, though I didn't weight my score any higher than anybody else's, it's basically just one of the four, that we all four agreed that ArmorCode had actually the functionality that we wanted today in the lab. We could see it in the POC. It's like we could do these things, whereas some of the competitors really did not weren't as far along. They weren't as mature. They certainly didn't have the self-service that we wanted. So to be able to go into the SaaSes and actually configure the interfaces between the scanner tools and the SaaS, they didn't have all that built out. And I believe that they will. I mean, I think ArmorCode has a lead, but I also think that's like it's like 3, 6, 9 months. You have a lead, but it's not huge. Okay, so I just want you to understand that that's true. So your competitors actually are also working in the same space, and they have some interesting ideas. But we definitely we were working on our time constraints too. We knew that we couldn't wait for 9 months for some other solution to come out. So that was the fact that you could deliver the goods now, and rather than actually, and you had the experience. It was obvious working with the POC that ArmorCode actually had the experience in doing a lot of good vulnerability management stuff because it showed in the product, right? You actually had integrations with a lot of different scanners and tools, and also like workflow integrations as well. And it had what we needed basically. So ultimately, so my team decided on doing that. Then we decided that we wanted to do a design partnership with ArmorCode because we thought that we could help both actually work out some of the issues that you have, but we wanted to make feature requests and things like that. And we thought that we had some other inputs or some value that we could have from actually like taking ArmorCode and putting it into our world. And fortunately, ArmorCode agreed to be a design partner. And I think that has worked really well. I mean, we have made several suggestions for feature changes, and I think that the process has gone well as kind of so having ArmorCode being our kind of our outsourced software development shop for our application posture security management. There is still some things that we're building ourselves. I mean, obviously, you have the integrations that ArmorCode has with the scanning tools are there, but a lot of times we still have to do the configurations and do stuff to build our own scanners, right? We have to manage a lot of it, some of the work. So I think that data collection parts are working. Our ArmorCode has taken over very well. There are parts of our workflow when I talk about like product initiatives, requirements management. I don't think we have all those features yet in ArmorCode, but I also think that you're moving to, you're open to actually adding features in the future. So I'm excited about that possibility. So I think it's gone very well for us. So far, we were able to launch with our goal of launching in January for ArmorCode, and we have onboarded all of our engineering teams into ArmorCode at this point. And when we gave out access to all the security champions, and then I met with all the engineering managers to go over their individual dashboards. And I think that's actually gotten some good results because we have a lot more transparency now than we ever did. And we now can report on metrics in a way that was much more difficult when you're talking about doing spreadsheets or you have a bunch of islands of individual data all over the place. So now I think that we have a lot more basically understanding and cooperation because people are beginning to understand how it's supposed to work. There's still more to do.
Definitely. Yeah. Sure. And Russell, thanks for the kind words. And regarding the lead, I would say that we currently have 9 months lead.
Okay.
But the lead is going to expand. And one reason to claim that is that we have a very rich background as a team.
Right. Yeah.
We have people coming in from security, and I myself come from 20+ years of experience of delivering products, developing products, and struggling, like you had this struggle, struggling to create an AppSecOps program. And there was no tool which actually understood the development side.
Right.
There are tools which will work as a gate, but tools which understood and also has a great service behind it. Right?
Sure.
So you find some here and there, you can find some tools which are like kind of rigid, or they are open source, there's no service behind them, or they don't understand the development. This application security, as I say, is uniquely positioned because the issues will start with the development team and they will get resolved with the development team. So the collaboration between engineering and security is the primary thing which
Right.
will make your application AppSecOps successful. And that's where we come in. And the other thing that we, like you mentioned, we are very nimble, and
Sure.
we look at customers and we make product accordingly.
Sure.
We have a roadmap which we adjust based on what the customers are actually needing.
Right.
And then the third thing is that there's a cross-pollination, us being a platform. So whatever we learn, best practices
Sure.
from one customer, we like to build our product on them and then pass it on to other customers. So this lead is going to widen.
That's good. And you're right. I mean, really, as I believe, Anant, your work and the strong engineering team that you've built is actually the reason why we picked ArmorCode, because and also in addition, you have close liaisons. Saeed's work is actually really great too. That we have regular meetings and we're really involved, and that's really great too. But definitely, you do have a high functioning software development team. Okay, yes, and that's how you. So you're right. I get what you're saying. You have a high functioning software development team, and you can do things pretty quickly. So you're right. Okay, well, but you are correct that actually you may well actually keep moving the ball ahead. Right. It makes sense. Okay, sure.
Thank you. Like, it's great to hear the stories that you two have. I know you two work very closely, and you work very closely with Saeed too. And let's say
and with Mark as well now.
Yeah, and now we have Mark, right? Product management, customer success, and engineering all working together, right? Yeah. It's great to hear that story. So Anant, so do you have any other questions before we wrap this up?
I think we have done covered a lot of ground. Russell, is anything else that you would like us to cover in this session? We'll do some editing of this stream.
No, it's fine.
So that's fine. We can talk, and then.
No, I think that I think I've covered a lot of the things that I actually wanted to talk about. I hope that I didn't rattle on too long.
That shows, because you have such a long experience and such a.
Russell, thank you very much for your time. It's great to know your journey. It's quite clear that you are a battle-hardened product security person here, starting all the way from the transition from the mainstream to PC to Cisco to the AWS world and this, right? So,
sure.
Yeah, thank you. We have benefited from engaging with you. Every engagement makes our product better, and it certainly has been very true in our engagement with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much,
Russell. Okay. Looking forward to keep working with you for a long-term association.
Yes, thank you very much, Raj, Anant. It's great working with you.
Thank you. Thanks, Raj.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.